Am I talking to the wonderful people? Yeah. Howdy, y'all. It's Pat here. Fly, Eagles, Fly. It's the only team you can go for. Oh, yeah. We're about to be giving away 8 Lost Caverns of Ixalan pre-release packs. Because I constantly order too much stock, and then my stock room in my house mostly looks like a bomb went off, which is very American of me.
I think it's very good that you've done this, these free giveaways as well, because it brings people in and they don't feel bad about scrubbing out, you know?
You get to stay around, you get to play. I mean, I think like at the first event I ran, someone who was 0-4 got one of like the second to last best prize. And like, this is the whole point. Like, how often do you see an event where people aren't just like 0-2 scrubbing out, angry, upset at the world? Like, you got to build it this way if you want people to come, so...
Yeah. And you've done very well. We see 63 players today. I'll let you do your announcement, but yeah, congratulations for another fantastic event.
Thank you very much, Angus. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the coverage. The coverage has been fantastic.
It's been really incredible. Let's do it.
Okay, y'all, we're doing giveaway. So this round, because I ordered too much stock, we're giving away 8 Lost Caverns of Ixalan pre-release kits. That's 8 people. Oh God, the screen closed on me.
Bad time for the screen to close.
There you go. I only use boomer technology, so if it's not a 3080 at my PC at my house, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, I got 8 people. Y'all have to put your hands up after I do this. I got Regan Frank. I got Chris Melly. I got Will Mybush. I got Tim King. I got Lewis Ophel. Nathan Widup. Colin Harris. And finally, Lachlan Saunders. Keep your hands up. I'm going to run around and give you some prizes.
All right, and we're going to set up for the next round. We have 8 players with their hands up right now as everyone prepares. I'm about to go into the commentary booth. Phil has left. Incredible. Looks good on this side. I'm actually going to see if Pat maybe would like to join me in the coverage booth. Phil has gone home for the day. He's done a terrific job, and we're going to relieve him of his duties. And we'll see how Pat feels. All right, round 4 has started, and I'm going to enter the commentary booth very soon. Do you want to do a round of commentary?
Sure. That's what they get.
Do whatever you got to do, and I'll meet you in there.
I gotta keep this serious. See what's going on here. I can do commentary for like 5 minutes and ask.
Whenever you want. Whenever you want. Yeah. Okay. We're getting a vibe. We're seeing our opening hands. Everything was good from the coverage table. Beautiful, fantastic, wonderful. I'm going to enter the zone of solitary in the coverage booth, away from all the people. Congratulations, everyone. You can now hear me as clear as day. We may see Pat join us soon in the commentary booth. For now, it's just me. Towards the end of the rounds, we have a backup coverage commentator. And we're going to wait for that. Otherwise, we may see some people scrub out and enter the coverage booth themselves. Moving into our games now, quickly to the chat. I thought Will won with that Emperor exiling Atali. Oh my God. So, fun fact, everyone. I have to issue an official takesies backsies. Dylan did not win that game. That game went to Will, and yes, it was the Wandering Emperor that exiled the Atali that stopped that from happening. But also, fun fact, Dylan went to the life total of 0 by both activating the Atali and activating the Ancient Tomb. So unfortunately, yeah, Dylan did not win that one, and that one went to Will. But now, that's okay. We're going to go into the next round, and I'm joined here with Pat. How you doing, Pat?
I'm not doing too bad. How are you, Angus?
Very good. I was very happy that we got a quick chat before you started doing your giveaways. And kudos, of course, again to giving away those prizes and making it fun for the people who are not necessarily out to win either.
Well, like I said, I think one of the important things is like you build the event that you're going to get. And if you only reward competition, you're going to get competitive players, and you're going to get competitive styles. And if you only reward turning up, you're only going to get people who turn up for the prizes and then don't. I think these sort of prize split structures where half of the prize pool is given to random entrants and half is given to sort of competitive players means you get to introduce both groups to each other. People stay around, they have a good time. You know, I think it incentivizes the right behaviors. And I think often a lot of tournaments only incentivize one behavior or the other.
That's actually a super interesting point, because something that I've seen, and perhaps it's the change in Highlander, perhaps it's the change in organized play, but it did have that ability where it turned people off playing in tournaments because it was too spiky, or it was like, you were getting rules lawyered or something. So it can turn out to be like too competitive, and it kind of like turns people off. But I think I choose to believe that also like people are just happy to be back, like back in sort of competitive play, back face to face.
Look, I don't think Magic means a lot without the Gathering. I think we all learned that during COVID. We all tried our Arena time, and we were all found it sort of lackluster, I think, most of us. Like, I don't even mind Arena as like a testing tool when I'm testing for Standard or Limited.
Yep.
But like, it isn't the same as getting to see your friends, getting to see people you might only see a few times a year, catch up, go out to dinner afterward. Like, everything that goes along with, it's all about the community.
It's the
like,
gathering.
It's the gathering part. The Magic part is so... I don't know. It's fine. It's just an excuse for us to get together. I think we could be playing any other game and we'd all be having half as much fun.
Yeah.
But like, I think the gathering is like 70% of why we're here.
Absolutely. We're seeing in the chat, what card is that? And that's a great question. It's on the screen right now. Cyber Matt from the Doctor Who set. How have you seen the Doctor Who set, Pat? How do you feel about it? And how's been the sort of the sentiment from buyers and players that you've interacted with about these extra sets?
Yeah, I think Universes Beyond for old fogies like me is still a little, how you doing? As a vendor, it's been very good. I think it introduces a lot of cards. I feel like Highlander has sort of moved. I think a lot of players who were like the old school Highlander players that liked it as like almost like a legacy or vintage light have found that it's now, it's not a rotating format, but it's a format that's moving fast. There's a lot of cards coming and going. There's a lot of cards to test out. We're getting like 15 to 20 cards a year from supplementary sets that are actually like Lelia quality, like.
Absolutely.
I mean, look at all the cards being pointed. Minsk and Boo, fourth longest on the watch list. Today, the Canberra team was testing that Bombardiers, that pirate card that they decided is bonkers. So, like, I think in some ways, like, being able to see cards like Cybermat is like, the collectors really enjoy it who are into the IP, but I think it does make 7-point like more of a format that stays more interesting longer. I think a lot of people used to play 7-point as like something on the side, and this constant flow of new cards has kept it very interesting.
Yeah, and fresh. And I think I like that point a lot, because I remember I used to play Legacy a lot, and then you play for a long time, and just decks were so expensive and cards were so powerful that nothing changed, and everyone brought the same 75 each time, and like that was fine, but it gets a little bit samey. I don't know if you can avoid that completely. But with these sorts of new cards coming in and them having this like pseudo arms race against themselves with this power creep, like you want to build a card that's the next Dragovan, you want to build a card that's the next Minsk and Boo.
Think about Lord of the Rings, like how many cards has that brought into the format they're seeing lots of play? You have Bowmasters, you have Fourth Elongus, you have the Jeskai Aragorn, which is quite good.
Yeah,
you have the One Ring. I mean, there's multiple points already from a set that's not even 6 months old.
Yeah.
Like that is, that was supposed to be modern power level. I think because every set is getting these commander decks and the quality of card you need in commander to be good enough, like Minsk and Boo, like because you're playing with 3 other players, it needs to be really powerful. I think it's going to lead to just a lot of cards, again, entering the format all the time and being tested. And, and so I think, it's interesting that, and those cards are really inexpensive. Like, the mana bases and a few staples are basically the only unaffordable cards at 7-point. The threats have all gotten very cheap, mostly.
Yeah.
There's very few expensive threats when you actually, break down a 7-point deck.
Yeah.
Some of the most expensive threats in the format are, $50 now. Most of it, what makes it expensive is only the land base, really, truly, and a few power, reserve list kind of cards like Time Walk that just, are off the charts good. But the threats are all quite affordable now. You can build a deck chock full of threats that cost next to nothing.
Yeah, and we saw that with the accessibility rules update that happened last year, where if you're playing no reserve list cards, you could get an extra point. And that gave people an opportunity to maybe not source that dual land or not source that Time Walk, even though the deck kind of needed it, because you can make a deck building decision to not play those exorbitantly expensive cards. I think something that we've noticed as well that is always true of Highlander is that even if you have to buy a $50 Ragavan or Uro or whatever was really expensive at the time, thank goodness you only have to buy one. You know?
We have to buy one instead of the play set, which is a lot better. And again, like, I mean, last CanBrawl, 2 8-point decks met in the finals, right?
Yeah.
There's an 8-point white deck and an 8-point red deck.
Yeah.
I'll admit, I don't get a chance to play a lot of Highlander. Being a vendor, my free time, my time to play is limited, but I was pretty, like, soft or didn't really think the accessibility update was going to do much. I was wrong.
Yeah.
I was wrong. It's done a lot more than I thought it would.
Yeah, I think it seemed to be, for the decks that could, they would. But people didn't really people weren't scratching their head on how do I make this an 8-point list or whatever. It's usually the people who were really close to having an 8-point list just got a free point. But that also has this interesting cascading effect where more 1-color, 2-color decks see play because it's harder to build a mana base without those dual lands. But it's also maybe it's a benefit to only playing one color, which is in the past, we've seen this over and over again, is that 4-color mid-range keeps seeing the top of the thing because there's just not enough downside for playing 4 colors.
Well, I mean, yeah, I definitely think that's still the case. I think the commander deck supplementary cards push in that direction. Again, things like Fourth Year Longest. Why is that card so good? Partially because you can pitch it to Fury and Solitude.
Yeah.
Partially.
Yeah.
I mean, but the amount of the good cards being printed in new commander decks that are multicolor is very high. They're mostly multicolor. I think and I'm not on the committee and I'm not going to pretend to understand the committee's decision making, but I think pointing the newer, more powerful cards that are multicolor and leaving the monocolor cards alone probably invites more freedom for the accessibility.
Yeah.
As let's say, they did point obviously Seasoned Engineer, but leaving those cards alone a little bit more and then maybe pointing something, there wasn't one for initiative, but a white-blue initiative card instead.
Yeah.
To then push people toward I think there's some wiggle room, especially with the inclusion of all these new cards at a high clip, to actually shape and meld the format better.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of whatever their goals are.
Absolutely.
So I've considered it myself in terms of there's some really powerful cards, and if you point the points at the ones that are multicolor soup, you actually then incentivize, I guess, people who are playing less expensive mana bases and the 8 points actually can take advantage of those cards.
There's a funny downside as well that the amount of pointed cards that are not reserve list is actually not that high. So you go, okay, I'm going to make an 8-point list. There's, of course, the value soup of Ragavan, Murktide, Minskimbu, Seasoned Engineer, but you're pretty incentivized to also play the Sol Ring or Mana Crypt package as well, where you're just putting all your points into fast mana and then not playing those 1-point cards. And it is nice to see cards like Minskimbu, even though they're quite good, go up to 2 points, and cards like Ragavan go up to 2 points, not because 8-point lists need more points where they're not spending it before, but yeah, as you said, to break up those mid-range soup decks.
Well, that's one of the things, specifically too, is that fast mana is just, as we get more and more of these products and the threat density rises, fast mana, I think will be under increased pressure possibly. The reality is when every card is just the amount of Lelia quality cards we're getting is growing exponentially.
Yeah.
If they continue on the pace of printing 35 to 40 unique commander decks a year, if we get 2025, we're supposed to get Final Fantasy and Marvel, both as supplementary sets, that'll probably be powered to a different power level than just standard. The quality of cards we're going to keep seeing is going to continue to be high. So I think the threat density starts to mean that, okay, just play fast mana with whatever best threats you can fit.
Yeah, whatever's not pointed at the time.
And that's we looked at, I think I was talking to someone about it, Justin Young's previous, one that, the deck that won CanCon 2 years ago is now worth 15 or 18 points.
Yeah, exactly. And that'll happen.
And that's the goal. It's find the cards that you think are, undervalued and then just slam them out until they eventually do get a point. And it's a bit like that. I think there's I've talked to a few players through the years who have had a lot of how would I put it? A lot of pride in getting cards pointed. Look at what I did.
Yeah.
I broke the format and they had to stop me.
Exactly. Me trying to get Reanimate pointed for 3 years, it's it would just feel nice.
If you got 1 point, would you not you would own it for forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I think there's something that's one of the cute things of the format that I think gets missed sometimes. Is yes, getting things pointed because of your success is very attractive.
Yeah.
People's
absolutely.
ego, it's good. Everyone wants bragging rights.
Yeah, of course.
Everyone wants bragging rights.
And that's something that we get with coverage now as well, is that another opportunity for people to be more well known within the community. Like before, like you might see Chris K again in a future thing. You might see Violet again in a future thing, and you're like, oh, I remember last time they played that card. Dread Fugue off the top of that Mishra's Bauble. We've completely neglected this game, but quick 10-second recap. Chris K on Affinity, Violet on a sort of much lower to the ground Lurrus deck, only in black and green. And it's been an interesting matchup so far. Chris kind of ran away with that first game with Smuggler's Copter and Walking Ballista and stuff, and Violet seems to be clawing her way through the next round, but we'll see what these hand disruption cards take. Let's definitely see Soulless Jailer and a Secret Lair Godzilla Mecha Titan. I think that's going to be a Walking Ballista, so kind of cute, the Soulless Jailer being like a Grafdigger's Cage on legs, and gives a sort of opportunity for to stem the bleeding from Violet's Lurrus game plan.
It's definitely been a design space. We've seen a lot of creatures in the last few years that are something on a stick. You know, I feel like it all started with Ramenup Excavator.
Yeah,
when we got Crucible on a stick, and then we've seen a lot more now, like Grafdigger's Cage on a stick. There's a few others I'm sure I'm missing. There
was a banger of a time in Modern Horizons where they just gave stuff on a stick a little go. We saw Cabal Therapist being
Collector
a Cabal
Oof.
Therapy, Collector Oof as well.
Nullrod on a stick.
Pondering Mage, a Ponder on a stick.
Yeah.
Bazaar Trader, Bazaar Baghdad on stick. Yeah,
there we go. They did, yeah.
they had a red hot go.
And some of those stuck pretty strongly. Like Collector Roof is a really good card. We
Extremely
see it
playable.
in a lot of decks.
Extremely playable. It's funny. It's a little way to get around the reserved list limitations, because you cannot print Nullrod anymore. It's reserved list, which makes it like $100 and something. Quite an expensive sideboard card, but Collector Roof relatively cheap.
Relatively cheap, and obviously the creature decks love to be, tutoring for their answers anyway. They're often, playing things like, Aladmari's Call, Green Sun Zenith.
Yeah.
Not really Court of Calling in this one too much, but I mean, like, maybe a bit, but like all the different creature search packages that mean that having this in a creature form is actually, in green, usually is very beneficial.
Yeah,
like
and
those decks like having the silver bullets.
Absolutely. And I guess a vendor question for you, speaking of which, have you sold any Green Sun Zeniths recently?
I have not sold any Green Sun Zeniths today.
Oh my goodness. Everyone's pulling them back out of their box.
I have foil ones here. I have foil Dryad Arbor OGs here today.
Nice.
No, nobody's picked them up. I kindly made sure Ben understood my comment was a joke in the 7-point update where I asked him if he understood how Green Sun interacted with on-map. That was at the behest of a certain person who, if they're listening, knows who they are, who said in our Discord channel while we were watching, does he know? But would not ask the question himself.
Oh dear, yeah. Green Sun Zenith, very powerful card. Can get any
powerful card.
green creature they want.
Which is often like
depointed.
Dryad Arbor is obviously the card that can, you can.
It's a very good turn one play.
It's a very good turn one play. Like, it definitely, those two cards I always view as in tandem. If you're gonna play one,
I agree.
I can't imagine you don't play the other. But again, like, I think Green Sun, giving it a D point seems good in terms of testing it out. I don't know if it'll stick or not stick. What do you know? You've probably followed this closer. What is the times they've gone from 1 to 0? How often do they have to go back? Because 1-0 is like the ultimate. It's like at 1, most of these cards see 0 play. At 0, they see a lot of play. Like,
there's argument for granularity is something that pops up every now and then, because there's so many 1-point cards that are kind of 0.5, and it's like awkward to have 0.5 in a a 7-point format, because you have to lock yourself into another point, I guess.
Yeah.
But I see in our most recent example, we had Mana Drain go to 0. And that was
tons of play.
It saw heaps of play. It's just like one of those funny ones where completely required at 0 points, but
at 1
relatively unplayable at 1 point.
Yeah. I feel like that's always like the interesting. There's a lot of cards that I think are, that is like the defining line between a card. And at 1 point, I don't say they've banned the card, but they've pseudo banned the card often.
Yeah.
Like the card that's on the watch list.
Yeah.
Like Forthielongus, I think at 1 point we'll see absolutely 0 play.
Yeah, I can see that.
I just do not believe it is. Is it a 0-point card? Maybe not. But at 1 point, I don't think it'll be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. In our chat, we have a eyes and at Patrick. So perhaps the person for whom your eye was drawn before has been found. And also mentioning Tesseract, many 0.5 cards for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. And cards, there's cards that go around the conversation so much for like depointing, and I think like the best way for you to make that happen is what we saw with Green Sun Zenith, where it might just be okay to depoint because you want to point a different deck, but in an indirect way. Like Green Sun Zenith is basically a point for Lurrus Breach. You know, Lurrus Breach, really one of our most powerful decks, definitely tier 1 at the moment. But if you unpoint Green Sun Zenith, maybe you're like politely pushing people into a different direction. And I think that's like a really elegant way to make that pointing happen.
Yeah. I mean, I've had it explained to me by a player. Like, I think the goal of 7-point, if you're like trying to play competitively, is to find the best grouping of cards that are undervalued.
Yeah.
It's like almost like fantasy sports drafts. Like, it's not important who you take. It's about finding value at that place. Like, it's about beating the mean. It's about wins above replacement. To use sports analogies, as a big sporty guy, fly eagles fly. Fly eagles fly. But like, it's tricky. Like, I think, like if you can put together a deck that is a year later, 12, 13, 14, 15 point, you're probably on the right path.
Yeah, 100%.
I know, like, there was a period there where, like, everyone talked about how Library was, like, the best 0-point card. Right? I've heard conversations revolve around what is the best 0-point card and using that as, like, a starting point for how you build, especially the value decks.
Yeah.
The combo decks tend to, like, not do that. They're just trying to go, how do I enact my combo with the points I have available? But the value soup decks often go, what are the cards that are most egregiously underpointed?
Yeah.
How do I abuse those cards?
Yeah, and we see that happen a lot in recent history with Ragavan and Minskenbu. Like Ragavan and Minskenbu was 0 points for a little while, and then they quickly went up to 1 point, and then they kind of stayed at 1 point for a little while, but then it was pretty obvious that that was a 1.5 or a 2-point card, you know? And that's
that card's a 2-point card.
Yeah,
that card's messed up.
It definitely kills you really quickly.
It
both
is.
of them.
It is like one of the design spaces of a card that is designed for Commander, because you need that power level of card to see Commander play.
Yeah.
You know, and in a 1v1 game, that does not function the way it was intended to.
Yeah, and we see so many powerful interactions like that were designed for multiplayer formats, but see a huge amount of play outside of that. Quickly ducking into our games so we know what's exactly is happening. We're definitely, is this ad nauseum? Are we having a value ad nauseum? It could be. Or maybe it's tainted. No, I think it's ad nauseum. I'm going to say it's ad nauseum, but something's definitely happening here where Violet is just ripping cards from the top of their library. Collector Roof, Noble Hierarch, Ignoble Hierarch as well, Dark Confidant. We've got a plethora of big creatures here, and I mean, pretty funny. Violet didn't even have to resolve that card draw spell before Chris was like, I think I'm going to concede, and packing it up, even though the life totals are still pretty high at that point.
Yeah, look, when you're drowned in that kind of value and you're a deck that doesn't feel like you have a way out, that's... It was a Jadelight Spelunker.
Okay, yeah, very, very thank you for the chat for that keen eye.
Well, there's another new card from LCI in play. Look.
Yeah. It's going to keep happening, I think. I mean, I think that Trumpeting Carnosaur has seen a little bit of play. This Spelunker, I saw it in like opening weekend or whatever, and it kind of looked interesting, but I guess if you're playing Lurrus, like any X spell is going to go up in value because you have
something to pump mana into later. Yeah,
exactly. So the Spelunker, huge and hilarious, because I was like, oh, this must be ad nauseum. No, Violet was just drawing like 7 cards from a Spelunker. So very impressive from Violet's side for sure.
Just going off, like I said, I mean the power level of this set seems pretty high. Carnosaur would obviously be high on your radar as a Reanimator player.
Yeah, I've been having a little go at it.
How do you feel about Bitter Triumph then?
I haven't had a chance to play it. I'm going to pick one up maybe even today, but it looks good. I think the Bone Shards. I think it's hard to say what the exact reason why Bone Shards is not quite good enough, but Bitter Triumph is good enough. But it's quite likely the sorcery speed of it. You in Reanimator, as far as I've done in the past, it's like you can't just put a creature in the graveyard and pass the turn. It's just like a death sentence. Everyone's playing Reanimate, everyone's playing Animate Dead. Graveyard hate's a huge thing. You're also signaling, of course, your next turn, so your opponent can make a play around that. But if you're like end of turn, Bit of Triumph, discard my Trumpeting Carnosaur, and then untap Reanimate, you just delivered like a pretty heavy 1-2-2-3 punch, you know?
Well, I think that's the concept. Yeah, I think instant speed is really important. You know, when I've played against Reanimator, like they obviously need to kind of, I won't say play like a control deck, but they need to definitely keep their cards close to their chest and keep their shields up at all times. Because again, you're right. Your opponent being able to reanimate your creature at times and stuff like, and not to mention the different graveyard hate they could have or anything else. Like you kind of need to like back it up immediately.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And being able to kill something and discard a card, like pretty good. Like I mean, at instant speed, not bad. You know.
I think it has pay 3 life as one of its options as well.
Yeah, it has pay 3 life.
So
I think
like
it hits planeswalkers and creatures. So it's a little bit flexible.
Okay.
A little bit more flexible.
I'm gonna give it a red hot go. I think it's. I've been playing on Holy Heat, which is also just a generically good card, but maybe it's time for a bit of triumph.
Do you play Collective Brutality at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's actually stayed in the list for quite a long time because
it's very flexible.
You like discarding cards. Your opponent's like, nah, I'm going to counter this. And you're like, okay, I wanted to put the card in the graveyard anyway, so joke's on you.
You also get to clear the way. Like the hand disruption part of Collective Brutality is just
huge.
Not to be underestimated.
Yeah, for sure. Going into our game 3 now, the most important one, starting us off. Gemstone Mine from Violet's side, and you don't see that very often.
I think
Gemstone
this
Caverns.
is a really underplayed card in 7 point. I was talking to someone about this. I think at some point this is going to trickle over and everyone's going to realize that this is a card that should be in a lot of 75s.
Yeah.
It lets you do very powerful things like cast a turn 1 Collector Roof and make your Affinity player cry themselves to sleep, possibly.
And it looks like Chris might be crying himself to sleep. We see. Fortunately, we can tap our lands for mana. Soulless Jailer on the battlefield, Mox Opal, and Shadow Spear, but it's not going to really be very good.
No, like.
Turn 1 Collector Roof, big plays.
Dude, turn 1 Collector Roof, really big play here. Like, stop the Mox Opal from generating value. Like, again. Gemstone Caverns, like, look, you're going to play it in your main deck, and you're often probably going to side it out in your games in the play and do what you do with it normally.
Yeah.
But I think it's a card that is very, very, very underrated. So I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen more of it. I think Reanimator should be playing it for example.
Interesting. Okay, I'm going to take that on board.
Being able to like have 2 mana to threaten more nonsense on turn 1 when you're on the draw. Like,
it kind of evens up that play draw difference that you see all the time, and then if you get to actually just like jump the curve even just a little bit, I'm high on it. I think this is cool.
I'm high on it too. I think it's very good. CDH kind of sees a lot of play with it. It sees play in Modern. Modern's really started to take off with it.
Oh, interesting.
Like it's really started to take off, especially in like Living End doing it a lot because it helps them accelerate their cascades. You know, I think specifically like we went through that phase where everyone got kind of a little bit degenerate with Serum Powder.
Yeah.
But like, I think Gemstone is the real Serum Powder in a way.
Yeah, okay.
Like in terms of like this weird card that has some weird interactions with how Magic is played. And again, being able to cheat a land ahead before the game has started is
huge.
It's huge. It's huge.
Especially if you have that 1 mana instant speed interaction, you can even start casting spells at the end of your opponent's first turn before you even get to untap for your first. It's pretty strong.
It's a very different ride.
Oh yeah,
it's a very different ride. So like, I don't know. I think it's pretty good. I think here we just saw it possibly win the game. So.
Yeah, we'll see. There's lots of removal spells coming from Violet's side. A little bit of an anemic hand from Chris. And from playing Affinity in the past, I can tell you very much that you kind of had to look at your hand post-board and say, does this beat a Null Rod? And if the answer is no, you have to decide whether or not you're going to take the risk because it's very hard to find that wear tear. It's very hard to find and cast. We've seen Chris's battlefield.
Chris is already hellbent, right?
Yeah,
he's already hellbent.
Yeah.
And
so so not much being able to happen from Chris. This is going to be tough. We see the all the cards that can't be activated in the naughty zone on the far right hand side because of the collector oof. But very unfortunate for Chris. This is not the game 3 that Chris was hoping, I'm sure.
That being said, like specifically, Violet has a long way to go to end this game.
Yeah, still a lot of life points that need to be dealt with, but Smuggler's Copter is going to make that a little bit easier. Collector Roof, obviously not that great of an attacker when you're locking down your opponent's board.
Whoa,
it's great at
firing off
smuggling.
that Abrupt Decay. This game is about to get interesting.
Yeah, I feel like
Oh, not
it
using the
just did.
copter. Oh, can you not use the copter because of old... is oof one
Oh
side?
yeah, you're right. It is absolutely two-sided. So Smuggler's Copter completely rusted up in the Oof's hands right now, so it cannot be piloted. But it does look pretty on that battlefield, at least threatening to do something once the Collector Oof leaves the battlefield, if it ever does.
If it ever does. Look, we're about to see Lurrus come down.
Yeah,
I don't
this
know,
is
does
terrible.
Violet have anything in the yard? Oh, yeah. Yeah, this
Interesting.
is pretty bad.
Yeah, that's a toughie. This sort of seems to be a very quick removal spell that is also a permanent, that is also very cheap, so I'm sure
From here, even if the oof gets killed, unless it's exiled, Lurrus will just bring it back.
Oh, painful. Painful. An outcome that I've seen many times in the past as an Affinity player is just the anemia of anyone's one single sideboard card can have it all come toppling down.
Yeah, I would say, like, yeah, I don't specifically know what is in Chris K's deck, but, I mean, you're going to need a top deck with only one blue mana available, two
It's got to be good.
very specific cards in a row that can answer both Lurrus and Collector Oof, and I don't.
It seems like Chris is doing a similar thing that I've also opted to do, and many Affinity players have done as well, which is play Otawara in the main board, just to bounce any of these shenanigans. But
Is that Jade Light back again or something similar, or what did that?
we got something, that's for sure. It looks to be possibly the Jade Light Spelunker back again. There's some sort of could even be the 1-mana one as well. But whatever's happening, the Surveiller's going, the Explorer's putting that card in the graveyard. And yeah, it looks like this might be pretty tied up. I don't know what Chris is thinking, but can't be good.
No, like we're going.
Well, this is a fun one. Clown Car.
Oh, this is
Another
Clown Car.
unset. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to roll dice equal to X. And for every even result, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on Clown Car, which is a 1-mana vehicle. And then if you get any odd results, you can have your very own clown robot. Still a little bit anemic here. I think Chris was probably hoping to get 2 odd results so that you would have a better blocking situation. But Violet was very easily able to take
that's
out that.
a Hex Drinker.
That's a big Hex Drinker. This
That-
is,
yeah.
that's enough to seal it up. I mean, I feel like we may have felt it seal itself up when we talked about Gemstone Caverns on turn 1. And here we are, you know?
Well, like, again, and the way Lurrus interacts with, again, Null Rod on a stick, when you now have something that keeps replaying it, like, it's a lot better.
Huge, huge. And it's interesting to see Lurrus still getting play at... how much time do we have?
About 20 minutes.
Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great.
Is she coming in here or are you coming
I'm going to come out there. And
Cool.
tell her to splay her cards out on the table.
Sorry?
Tell her to splay her cards out on the table.
Yep.
Thank you. Oh, cool. Okay. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was good. I just got a migraine.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. All
All
right,
right, wait
mate.
for me to give prize packs. I'm going to bounce.
Okay.
Thank you very much for having
Yeah.
me. I
Absolute
have
pleasure.
vendor things to go do.
Yeah, go and do your thing. Go and do your thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angus. And like I said, thank you. The coverage has been fantastic.
Fantastic. Happy to work together with you, mate. We will go to a break. We're going to actually get Violet to show the deck off a little bit. We're going to come out and do a quick deck tech for Violet's deck and get an idea about what she was thinking during that game. But I'm very excited for it. We have about 20 minutes left, so we'll do a quick deck tech with Violet, and then we will move on to the next round. Yeah, nice. So we're here with Violet, the recent winner of round 4. Congratulations, Violet.
Thank you.
I would love to hear more about your deck. Would you give us a little deck tech and give us an overview of what decisions you've made with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the core of this deck came from an idea when I was evaluating the points list and how it was approached. So my understanding of the point list, or my view on it, is that there are 3 kinds of cards. There's cards that empower or create a strategy, so things like Channel, things like Thassa's Oracle, There's cards that are generally good, so things like Oko, Ragavan, Minsk, and Mu. They can kind of go in multiple strategies. And then there's your support cast, so Mystical Tutor, Demonic Tutor, your ET, for example. There are multiple cards that fit into multiple categories. So, for example, Time Walk is just a generically good card, but if you take infinite turns with it, obviously that turns into a new strategy.
Of course.
That's like the main one. There's like Strip Mine, which is kind of just generically good in an aggro deck, but if you ever play like a Ramunap Ruins or something, you can turn it on, so to speak. And with that understanding of the points list, we have a very strict way that I view it, which is the more points something is worth, the more we have to be able to get it every game. Because otherwise, you're spending your points on a card that you're not seeing, you're at a disadvantage to someone playing 7 1-point cards, right?
Makes sense.
That leads to people playing Spellseeker as a 3-mana 1/1 so they can get their card. They're playing Step Through so they can get Thassa's Oracle, which is just an unplayable card.
Yeah.
And Lurrus is 3 points, so it's less than half your point total, but you get to draw it every single game.
Yes.
You never have to worry about not drawing it.
Yeah.
And you never have to put any effort into drawing it. You don't have to play a card that searches for it. You don't have to worry about it getting discarded, for example. It might get countered, but at that point you're grinding the game out.
Yeah, and
So-
I think one of the big reasons that it became 3 points over the course of time is that you just saw value of it every single game, you know?
Yeah, like you get to start with 8 cards in hand, where your 8th card is worth 3 points and can win the game by itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
On top of that, we're playing a Jet mainly because the 1-point cards were all a bit medium, and I wanted to spend the points on something that was good when drawn, but not backbreaking if not drawn.
Yeah.
So if you can't get your Clamp with a Saga because you can't afford both slots, it's really awkward. If you draw a Jet, that's fine. You get to power stuff out. You've got a Chrome Mox and a Mox Diamond as backup acceleration. But if you don't draw a Jet, you'll live. You know, it's not an issue. You're kind of just playing threats. What then happened when we decided that we were going to build a Lurrus deck is we had to choose colors.
Yep.
So obviously you have to play at least white or at least black just so you can cast it. Technically there were some weird combo decks that were going in there. And the issue with each of the Jeskai colors that we found was white had good removal for the colors, but it had bad threats. So you could play like a Thalia, and you could play, generic Hate Bears and Thraben Inspector and Esper Sentinel, but the best threats in white are all Planeswalkers that cost 4. You've got your Gideon, you've got your...
Wandering Emperor.
Yeah, your Wandering Emperor, your Elspeth, your Gideon of the Trials.
Obviously, like Solitude and stuff as well.
Yeah, you miss out on Solitude, you miss out on Cauldron or Batterskull. Like, you kind of just lose out a bunch playing white. Playing blue, you get to play a full interactive suite with Lurrus, so you can play Force of Will if you want, you can play Drain, and you can use the Drain for Lurrus mana. But if you play a blue with white, your threat base is really bad.
Oh, yeah.
And if you pair blue with black, there are a bunch of holes that you can't answer.
Okay.
So it's really hard to gain life, it's really hard to deal with artifacts and enchantments, and your threat base is, like, super weak. Because the best threats in blue and black are all, like, 6 and 7 drops that you dealt with.
Yeah.
Murktide Regent is a 2-drop, but not when you need it to be a 2-drop.
Yeah, exactly.
And that left red. Red was fine. And honestly, Jund Lurrus got built while we were testing. You get Lightning Bolt, you get Bomat Curie, you get Blood Tithe Harvester, you get a bunch of good cards.
Yeah.
The issue that we found was that, the best threats in red at the moment are all 3-drops or 4-drops. So you've got your Lelia, your Goblin Rabble Master, etc. You've got cards that kill people, but you can't do it.
Yeah, and we've seen that with like red-white and black-red, where it's like you want to be like powering out Mana Crypt Lelia, you want to be powering out Goblin Rabble Master, but that's not your style at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. You just can't do that with Lurrus, and the other big issue that we found was that one of the big draws to playing red is playing Maddening Hex, Blood Moon, and Magus of the Moon.
Right.
And you can't play any of those cards.
Yeah.
So what we settled on was green-black, because it gave you a really decent threat base.
Yeah.
So you've got green, which gives you some removal. It gives you Once Upon a Time in Green Suns now that Green Suns is free. It gives you Abrupt Decay, and it gives you like random shitty creatures, Tarmogoyf, etc. Deathrite is broken, obviously, but Tarmogoyf, Hexdrink, and random idiot creatures. Your black is your support color in terms of threats, but it is your main interaction suite. So you get to play discard spells, trade resources, because you're going to be up a card. You get to play a bunch of cheap removal spells that interact with most things that you care about. The big hole for the deck fixes itself, which is it's really hard to remove planeswalkers off the board, but you play a bunch of creatures you don't care about trading, so you can just run them through into planeswalkers.
Yes.
So it fixes itself.
Yeah, interesting. And then here we are, and this is where we're left up with green black, the Rock, which is a very old meme about a modern deck, I believe, that was just green black. It was the Rock and his minions. Why it was called that?
Because Phyrexian Plague Lord kind of looked like the Rock, I think.
Okay. Very cool.
Because it was the Rock and his minions when he was a wrestler. And Phyrexian Plague Lord, I think that was the name, plus Deranged Hermit, or one of the hermits that made squirrels.
Was the minions.
Yeah, it ate your opponent's board, and otherwise you were just kind of a green-black mid-range deck.
This is
so
a
this
far
is
cry.
the epitome of a green-black mid-range deck, where you play discard spells, you play threats, you start with 8 cards in hand, and you hope that you don't die.
Yeah, a couple of really interesting ones, and it's nice that you get Green Suns at 0 points. I think that's a huge pull into this. Another couple of really nice cards that you get is, of course, Fiend Artisan as well, which is kind of like a Birthing Pod, kind of like a Green Sun Zenith, but again, putting stuff in your graveyard you don't really care about because you have Lurrus to get it back out again.
Exactly, yeah. I think the big thing that we discovered during testing, which turned on a lot of cards, was the Explore package.
Interesting.
So
we saw the Spelunker in one of your games really going off. I was like, I think Violet has an ad nauseum, and no, it was just a Spelunker doing lots of spelunking.
So the concept behind the Explore creatures was twofold. It was drawing extra lands is never an issue when you're playing a creature that's like, the size doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you're playing a 2-mana 2/1, but you're playing a bunch of mid-range creatures, it doesn't matter how big your creature is, drawing the extra land is fine. Because we're playing Lurrus, we don't get to play big cards, but there's still enough mana sinks in the deck that you can make sure that every extra land you draw does something. So we have 2 creature lands, which is Restless Cottage and Heim.
Nice.
We've got Evolved Sleeper is a mana sinks, Turok costs 4. We've got Jade Spelunker, which we saw, Fiend Artisan, Hex Drinker, Scavenging Ooze, Misery Shadow. All of these are mana sinks.
Really elegant deck building, because you're finding a way to negate what is one of Lurrus's downsides, which is having to play a bunch of really cheap stuff and not being able to have any mana sinks. But we see a lot of mana sinks in here, and even with the Fiend Artisan, as we mentioned before, it gives you some utility when you kind of don't really have anything else going on but a bunch of mana.
Yeah, exactly. And then the extra upside of the Explore package is that dumping cards into your graveyard because you're trying to draw a specific thing doesn't hurt you because you have Lurrus.
Yes.
So if you
so Veil is an upside.
If you explore a Tarmogoyf and you don't need a Tarmogoyf yet, but you might need one in the future because you're looking for a discard spell or a removal spell, just goes in the graveyard. You pick it up later.
Yeah.
And then obviously it grows Fiend Artisan, so you have a real threat that you can Green Suns for in certain spots. Exploring helps trigger with Traverse the Uvenwald to make sure that you can get your bullets. And then the small upside is that extra lands in hand can turn into real cards in Smuggler's Copter.
The Smuggler's Copter,
Everything
exactly.
really kind of just came together very slowly.
Nice.
We went through a lot of iterations to try to work out what cards were playable, what cards were not. There was a Reanimate in here for a while, there was a Dismember, a Trophy, and we settled on this removal suite, which I think might be a bit funky. There might be something we've missed.
It's a good mix of instant and sorcery as well, because of course you want to turn on Delirium the best you can.
Yeah.
And
enchantment.
Well, there you go. I was looking at that before. Actual deadweight, not deadweight in this deck, because you're able to cast it from the graveyard as a removal spell with Lurrus. Incredibly impressive. I think you've done really well with this deck. What is your record so far?
We're 3-1.
Excellent.
So round 1 we played against Breachstorm. Lost game 1 pretty convincingly. Game 2 and 3 we set up a combination of an Oof or a Null Rod, a Deathrat Shaman or a Scooze to start eating flashback spells, and then once we had them slowly locked out of doing things and we discarded the spells in their hand, we would just attack them for 2 or 3 or whatever it was. Round 2 was the loss to Ben. He was on Jeskai aggro mid-range, I guess.
Okay.
We died to Murktide Regent, which is one of the weaknesses because Snuff Out's kind of one of the few things that actually deals with it. And we got soloed by Aragorn in game 2. So we just didn't do anything for it. Big Baneslayer. I had 4 creatures in play and they all died. Well, they all didn't do anything. And then round 3 was red-black aggro. So pretty much the Eclipse or the other one.
Yep.
So Mana Crypt, Ancient Tomb, 3 drops, etc.
Yep.
It was kind of just a grindy game where they played threats and removal, I played threats and removal, but I would eventually stick a Lurrus, get an extra threat, and the game would end.
Yeah, nice.
That's kind of how it played out. And then obviously
we saw round 4, which was a pretty convincing win against Chris. I think something that we really noticed, was the Collector Roof. And I would love to know, we were mentioning before in footage about how Gemstone Caverns was huge in that game. But also, I'd love to know if is how it's been for you in other games as well, and if it's worth playing for our Highlander aficionados out there.
It's very particular, and it really depends on A, the kind of game you're playing, and B, what your sideboard slots are, like what sideboard cards you have available. So the big draw to play Gemstone Caverns in this deck is that we have a lot of mana sinks and we have a lot of cards that draw cards. So losing the card for the Caverns recoups itself very easily by exploring back into a land, for example. Or playing like a Bob that will draw you an extra card here and there. The second part is that because we have Lurrus's restriction, our sideboard slots are really thin anyway.
Yeah, sure.
There aren't that many cards that we could play that feasibly aren't in here for certain matchups. Things like Bitter Blossom could have made the cut. Having, what's it called, like an Assassin's Trophy could have been fine, but we can't play Choke, for example. We can't play Shoulder, for example. So when you're limited in your sideboard slots, especially because you already have 14, we wanted a high payoff card where we could trade a resource early in the game and use it to generate a tempo advantage over time, which Gemstone Caverns does. The other upside is that it makes colorless when you draw it, but that doesn't actually matter. There's a lot of colorless
especially in a
pips
2-color deck.
Yeah, exactly. You can hit it with an Explorer and it's fine. Like, you can just pitch it to a Smuggler's Copter if you want to.
So the downside, not that much of a downside, but the upside, huge. As we saw in that game, Turn 1 Collector Roof, it just put the game away nearly immediately.
Gemstone Caverns is a bit of a crutch of mine when it comes to deck building, but there are plenty of decks that could feasibly play it that shouldn't. So any kind of blue mid-range deck where you're trading your resources with yourself, so you're cantripping to turn on things, your cantrips go to your graveyard to help with delve spells, for example. Gemstones isn't great there, because you're generating advantage as tempo rather than actual card. Right? But Gemstone pitching a land, casting an Explore guy to draw a land, totally fine. You're breaking parity, but now you have an extra land drop and you're on the play now.
Exactly. And it affects the game for the rest of it, because you play so low to the ground, you're playing such a tight curve that turn 2, turn 3, turn 4 is crucial for this deck. And we see it play out now. Lovely. Thank you so much, Violet, for doing our deck tech. Really incredible deck, and we'll be looking for you in those final seats.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Wish me luck.